You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Just do it together.
Well, great. And you know what? Because I must be getting older. The name is Ryan, is that correct?
It is, yeah.
Oh, shoot, not too bad. So Ryan, I really appreciate you giving me the tour. I am blown away. As mentioned, I've had an opportunity to work with some other systems, and they're just evolving, and I think this is the future of VR, and I think people need to explore it and take some of these tours. This is a perfect one to start at. And again, Ryan, thank you. And signing off, All Things 3D. I wish I could just poof, but...
Well, it was great to meet you, and thanks for taking the time. Yep.
Okay, bye. Oh no, I have to figure out how to get out of here. I'm stuck. No, you're trapped. That's a Black Mirror episode.
Hello, hi, this is Mike Balzer of All Things 3D, and this is 3D in Review for, as mentioned, I was going to skip a week, so we're looking at, what is today? January 25th, 2019. And this week, I think our theme is going to be how 3D is involved in deep learning. And I'm choosing that word intentionally instead of the word that I think is overused and really does not describe what's going on, and that is AI. So you will not hear that word as we continue. But that's our main theme. But before we get started, I wanted to go ahead and bring this up real quick. And because it might disappear, actually I'm going to probably pause the laptop because we're going to get more into it. But if you tuned in a couple of weeks ago, you probably remembered that I had talked about actually using this particular system, which is the DreamGlass from DreamWorld, as well as with the structure sensor core, and actually the structure core from Occipital. And by combining the two, I was able to give the DreamWorld headset 6 degrees of freedom. Now, with that being said, and again, this is the reason that I am not going to spend a lot of time with this, is that it's very temperamental. And I don't know if this is an ongoing issue in all the systems or just mine, but the proximity sensor, normally it's above the brow. That's not only in this device, but in VR devices. When it is shuttered and causes the LCD panels to turn off, what happens next is only one of the panels come back up, or they go into an interlace. So there's clearly some issues there. It does seem to be more indicative of the situation as it warms up, so there could be a thermal issue here. It does get fairly warm along the plate that's right above the brow, so there could be some instabilities from temperature rising. I haven't put a lot of time or effort into it. I haven't actually worked with it lately, and I have not heard back from them since I actually identified this early on. All right, well, let me go ahead and fade to the scene. So here you go, and this is something that I put on. This is Queen Nefertiti. This is the bust that's actually in Berlin. But what I wanted to do was create something for this demo exhibition that I put on at the OMSI in November, was the ability to put this on and actually feel like you were in front of the statue. Now what you're seeing is a zoomed in version of this through the headset. The top part of that there is the top frame, and then the actual image. And it is quite good. Now clearly my little, if you remember the little guy next to me last week, that's a 720p, about a 1280 by 1024 image. There he's kind of floated, but as you can see, I can move it around, and it looks like I've lost the actual tracking because I can move the camera and it no longer moves, which I'm not surprised. All this stuff is temperamental, and essentially I think what happened is that it lost the, see, notice it's gone now. So let's see what we can do here. I should be able to let that go, and then we're going to bring this back later and figure out why we're having issues. Okay, let's see if it's come back. Nope, it's still static. So let me close that out real quick, and then you can get a chance to see it. All right, so give it a moment to come back up in a second. Okay. So cross your finger that we actually have this come back up. There it is. So, as mentioned, I do have the positional or 6 degrees of freedom enabled. So let me take out my head or earpieces, and you should be able to still hear me. I'm going to move it around a little bit so you can see it in action, and I should be able to move it. I've got it on a tripod, but as you can see, I can move back and forth using the IMU that's built into the occipital structure core. I can basically get my 3 degrees of freedom for the based on the IMU, and then the fusion with the 2 infrared cameras allows me to move it back and forth, as you can see there, and get closer, back, and this is all through the DreamGlass headset, and it's actually pretty good. I mean, you still have some of the ghosting that you see in other things, but keep in mind this is through like a 1080p camera. I've got this set up for 720 by 1024, so you can see more of it, and I've actually fine-tuned the focus so that it seems fairly sharp. But the problem is the camera is not an HDR camera, and I don't have much control. I guess I could tweak it a little bit over the blown out areas, but you should get a really good idea. It's not as blown out when you look at it. I did create some artificial lighting. I'll kind of look up. You can see here some little artificial like xenon lights in the display. So it is a little bright, but as you can see, it works pretty well. The delay there, the ghosting that you see there, or the trails, is the camera itself. It has nothing to do. It's really crisp. It's about 60 frames per second. No, I think it's like 70 if I remember correctly. The frame rate is fairly high on it. There is no blur, and it's very impressive. Again, though, the problem is if we've got little quirks like the proximity system, it's going to be an issue. Okay, we're going to get into our main topic now, but I just thought I'd bring that up before I kind of pause. I don't know if you can hear the fan there, but I think I'm going to go ahead and just drop out of this, come back to my cell. Oh, it's gone. And then we'll get started with the news and the main theme of the show. So give me a moment to shut it down. Okay. Now, as I mentioned in the last episode, there is a little bit of an issue, in my opinion, with the service that Occipital's created. It takes about 60-70% of processor performance, which I think is not good. And we're going to talk about some other components, one being Microsoft, and how they've applied some of this deep learning that we're going to talk about here in a moment to their new chip that's going to be used in the HoloLens 2, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Okay, so let's kind of move on into our first item, and let me find my right screen, and that is, let's talk a little bit, kind of, I wouldn't give a primer, but I'll have links in the show notes if you want to read more about it. As mentioned, I don't want to call this AI. What I want to call it is, in this case, convolutional neural network, and there's going to be another term we're going to look at right after this. But this is one of the main applications. Essentially, there's some diagrams here, but it's based off of neural networking, and essentially you create a series of samplings, and then you just basically determine in that sampling if it passes or it doesn't pass. So what's not really shown here is that we also have some loopbacks, so that if it does, it says, yeah, I've got the right one, or yay, no, I don't have the right one. And we just continue through that, and this kind of goes through some detail And this is really important because this is the main item that's used, and it also talks about the advantage of GPUs. You may have heard of Tensor. You may actually be working with those from NVIDIA. So NVIDIA really has a niche here to be able to utilize this capability, and they're actually moving forward with it. Obviously, you know they got their two TX2 based processing unit that's being used in cars, and we're going to talk a little bit about them as well. So this is one item, and again it's called convolutional neural networking, and then the other item is called long short-term memory. And as it just indicates, you can combine these two together to provide a memory system, and this allows the systems to essentially have some long-term memory that can be utilized from the decision making it's made in the convolutional system that we just talked about. So combining these two together, we're now able to create, especially when, and I'll talk about it here in a second, when we combine it with GPUs or other processors that have algorithms and libraries set up specifically for learning. And one of the things that we're now seeing is something like the NVIDIA Drive Constellation system here. And I think I've talked about this before, but this is really important because what this does is allow us to simulate the entire environment in a very photorealistic location, and then actually hook it up to the Drive AGX Pegasus system, which is shown here, so that all the inputs coming from this VR environment, or virtual, I wouldn't, we may all think of virtual as having goggles, but if we wanted to look into this, obviously it would look like this. But since essentially we're using this environment to provide feedback into the driver simulator, we can then cause, as we just talked about, our convolutional system to make decisions and then a historical reference and memory, so that we can throw that information all back into the main system, all without having to put a vehicle on the road. And I'm really very interested to follow up on this because I think it's going to be very cool. And if you're not aware of it, also the other thing in the news from Google, and clearly they're probably not using an NVIDIA product. I think they've got their own custom devices now. But if you're, what is the name of the game? I can't remember it. It's a Blizzard game. Their system now has become, I guess, the champion, beat the champion. And so that's been in the news lately. It's sad that I can't remember. And then here it is again. And so, I mean, this is one vehicle that we can use an actual VR virtual environment in order to provide repetitive learning, which is extremely important. And this is all done kind of like in the Matrix. All right, let's look on to something else that's very important with deep learning, and that is MRI, or medical scanning systems. I have this article from Stanford, AI for Healthcare, that you can go ahead and read. I'm just going to go in. As you can see, they also use a version of convolutional neural networks in order to provide more information. And I just saw something the other day that some of these systems now is equally adept at providing accurate assessment of, for instance, this is for MRIs, but we also have surface camera systems that have learning experiences that can resolve and identify skin tumors and cancer, and as well as, or better than, I can't remember the name of the specialty, but essentially those who, physicians that work with, got a brain loss. All right, but here's a good point. You can read the article, and I wanted to get into this kind of book. This is available. It's about $100. If you're doing this kind of thing in medical image analysis, this would be kind of like the go-to Bible. Talks about how we can use the deep neural networks and so forth in order to provide learning systems. And well, I just think it's kind of a primer. I've been reading it, and I think it's a really good tool to work with. You can buy it, the ebook version, for $100. As you know, a lot of these books are fairly expensive, especially from the medical community or the research portion. But you can see how they're applying it in different areas and the type of algorithms being used. So it's kind of neat. All right, on to the next area. So where else are we seeing deep learning? How about in 3D printing? So MIT has created, I guess this was at SIGGRAPH, but essentially they're able to mimic not only the image, because you can do that with basically your phone camera, but able to get the nuances and then 3D fabricated in layers based upon a, I don't know, was it a 16 color palette, by creating layers and then using a print dot association. I want to say stochastic, but they don't identify that. Here we go, it's 10 different transparent inks. They can create similar, and I think I might even have a little video. If I don't, we'll play the one that's right here. Frankly, because it's using CMYK or 10 layers, the colors do vary. But I did find it interesting, and even though they call it 3D printing, obviously it is a layered-based system in order to provide some of the texturing that one sees in a painting. The other notable thing that they identify is they're able to capture the painting without having to deal with the shadowing that occurs when you have thick paintbrush strokes and so forth that actually creates ridges that are three-dimensional in nature. They say it's not good enough yet to do something like Starry Night because of the type of blue that's used, but they say they can fix this particular issue by adding more colors. So, and that seems to be the case in your standard 3D printing too. If you know, they add extra colors in order to get the full gamut for photo reproduction. Okay, so let's see where we're at now. I don't want to get into that. Thought I had another item. Well, I'll cover them later on. I guess I jumped ahead here. All right, well, we'll just go right into it. Did I miss it? Okay, here we go. I thought I had a separate article. Well, let me see if I can find it real quick. Oh, I think I just missed it. Oh, we'll talk about it here. So one of the things, and I noticed they show it as a three-dimensional object, but one of the things you may have already read is that this new HoloLens 2 has a new AI chip. Actually, it's their new, it's disappointing that I didn't have it up, but it's their new holographic processor unit, and they're actually using, again, the term AI, but a learning system that is probably because they use something like to identify vertical, horizontal objects and so forth. So it has somewhat of a library that helps influence. So instead of just saying, okay, that's a plane, they may know what type of plane, or at least identify that it's a 90-degree plane or maybe a 60-degree. So it helps along. The other thing that's really important that I found in case of like the occipital and your phone and so forth is that it has to process that information from the camera itself. And then, for instance, like in a headset, like the mixed reality headsets for VR that Microsoft had, it has to take those two cameras and run that over a USB 3. So you've got this full bandwidth of USB 3 being used for all this data, that if they had this particular processor built directly into the headset, then all they need to do is provide the spatial information. And we're going to talk about an Intel product here shortly that actually does that, and you can buy one for about $199. And I've already put one on order, and I'm really excited to see what we can do with that. But back to the Microsoft. But again, here's a way of using deep learning or convolutional neural networks in order to improve the SLAM, or the spatial localization capability. And that means it'll probably have better performance, better stability, more accurate placement of AR objects. So a lot of people are really excited when this eventually comes out. And on that note, let me jump back to the item that I went to. It appears at the Mobile World Conference, which I think is like February 25th. They're going to do an announcement. Some people have suggested that they're going to be announcing this because Alex Kipman, who essentially is the lead development manager of the original HoloLens and also the developer of the mixed reality environment, may be on stage because of this. And so we'll have to see. So it's not going to be too long. Lots of pluses supposedly in this. They're maybe going to an ARM chip, like a version of the Qualcomm Snapdragon 850 as they see here, but some people think it might be, I don't want to call it the XR. There's a version they made specifically for this. They may be going to that. What else? They'll be using a new lens system that will provide a wider FOV, which will be very interesting, about 70 versus what do they have now, about 35, 40. So it'll be much more expansive. And then the other thing is that it could be a lot lower in price. And if they can bring it down to $1,000, I know I'll be standing in line to get one. That's actually would be a good price. But we'll see. Okay, so let's move on to where are we at now? I'll bring up the video. If you're a Blender fan like I am, this might be cool. This is by Andrew Price, and actually I heard that his last name is not pronounced that way, but oh well, I haven't heard him actually.
So show of hands, who here makes money
here.
from somehow
So I put in my
inside the 3D
earbuds,
industry?
I guess I'll see
They
it.
got a job at a studio. Yeah, almost everyone. Who
hear it.
doesn't? Okay, what are you guys doing here? No, I'm kidding. So I love this job. It's fun, and that childlike wonder of like, yeah, bringing something from my head into life is still there. I really enjoy it. But I want to continue doing this, because it's a fun job. But if you've paid any attention to the news, then you've no doubt seen reports of automation and AI, the doomsday theories that we're all going to be out of jobs, all sitting on the street, nothing to do. And I always thought like, yeah, but that doesn't apply to 3D, because like what we're doing is art, and computers could never replicate art. But then you see
I'll
a
just
couple of
scroll
stories.
up a little
Also,
bit.
every camera manufacturer.
So he goes through and he talks about how learning systems are helping
facial
improve
animation.
3D
If you're not used to that, because
visualization.
you
It's a good little video.
different
Take some time to.
sceneries.
I like this
And
guy.
what's crazy is
He's
that
not,
the input that's given to it
if
is
you're a
so
Blender
simple,
fan, you're
and
probably
yet it's
familiar
just
with him,
churning
but
through
he,
ideas and spin
as
off
many
point for
people,
a
is
lot
very
of concept artists.
enthusiastic guy, and he
So I think
has
it's a
a
sign
lot
of
of
the
great
times. We're going to start
tutorial
seeing this.
videos out on YouTube. So I'm glad that they
Speaking
got
of
him
which,
to do this. But
does anyone recognize? Feed it a bunch of images, create some
talk
ideas.
about,
Spooky down the street,
image
and it's a
recognition
painting,
and so
but
forth.
every frame
So
is moving.
go ahead and watch it yourself. He has a lot of good points in there, and I think that would be kind of fun to work with. And I don't know if Blender is going to be using some of those techniques, but that's going to give me a segue into my next item. And you may already be familiar with this, but I just saw this today. I don't use the product, but it appears that I might start using it. As you know, I use 3D Coat, but I may look into this now that it's part of the Adobe family. I don't know exactly when it'll become part of their subscription, but I do know that Mixamo became part of it, sadly, and I would have to be one of those that would agree. By them going into the Mixamo market and not really improving it, a lot of people were disappointed. In fact, they actually removed some features that a lot of people were annoyed with. But the fact is, if you have an Adobe license, a subscription license, you can now use Mixamo. So that, I guess, is a plus. But hopefully they'll continue to upgrade this product, and they don't really talk much about it. They just show some images, talk about how long, I guess it's algorithmic. I have not heard it being pronounced, but they've been around. They know they make Substance Painter, and I think there's 3 different technologies actually if we go out here. Painter, Designer, and Source. I've tinkered with it a little bit. As I said, I'm partial to 3D Coat, but I guess I'll download the 90-day version and play around with it. And hopefully I'll see a version of this in my Adobe subscription license soon. So if you're not aware of it, there you go. All right, on to the next item. Intel RealSense tracking camera. Actually, let me jump back. I apologize. AGOD Lab. I heard somewhere that a lot of people, or Epic and Unreal, were talking about providing some type of scripting very similar to Unity to go along with their blueprinting of C++, being C++ being more of a low-level language for Unreal, Blueprints being a visual scripting language, and then a lot of people wish that they would have something in between. It appears that this might be the direction they're going with. I haven't had a chance to really tinker with it yet, but I would think of it kind of like Python. There are some major, what do you want to call it, routines or libraries that provide everything in a single call, and then obviously some decision making and so forth. I have a little video that I can show, so let me go ahead and run it through.
SkukumScript is a text-based programming language and tool suite specifically designed for video games, and now it is available as a turnkey plugin for Unreal Engine 4. Battle-tested in the game industry trenches for more than 2 decades, SkukumScript has been used in AAA projects such as Sleeping Dogs and Triad Wars. SkukumScript is ideal for gameplay such as AI, missions, interactive audio, and much more. SkukumScript is very efficient both in terms of speed and memory footprint. It is compiled using its own IDE, and the compilation is super fast. Here's how long it takes to compile the open-world game Sleeping Dogs and all of its more than 9,000 script commands. The SkukumScript IDE here communicates remotely with the Unreal game runtime on any platform. It can be used as a powerful command console, editor, and debugger. This is an already running demo with the player here and some robots that can be controlled with scripts from the IDE. This path command tells the 3 different robots to path towards the player, and when they all reach him, do the boom command on the player. This any command randomly picks one of the 3 robots and executes the boom command on it randomly. I'll run it a few times to give an example of the randomization. Finally, this reset command tells these 3 robots to go back to their positions. Live interaction on mobile devices is a huge time saver. Here's the SkukumScript console sending the same commands in real time on an iPad. You can also query information and have it printed in the SkukumScript IDE log. You can even call the SkukumScript IDE from other applications such as Visual Studio here or your favorite editor to give them scripting superpowers. Being able to run quick snippets in real time like this will completely change your workflow, and everyone on the team will use it and swap around their favorite bits of code. Any method you define in SkukumScript can be placed in a blueprint graph as a node. For example, handle move forward here contains 3 lines of code that can be placed in this graph to simplify it. Just right-click and select the function from the menu, place it as a node in the graph, and hook it up like any other node. Now hook up the other input direction method called handle move right as well. And here is the simplified graph using SkukumScript. You can also call blueprints from SkukumScript. Blueprint event nodes are automatically created when you create SkukumScript methods such as this on SkukumTriggered. It is available in blueprint graphs as an event. Now let's get that event to call another node. Let's use another method exposed from SkukumScript called SkukumFunction. Just hook them together like any blueprint nodes. These nodes don't quite match. We want to pass on a vector, but the receiving function doesn't expect one as an input. Modifying the function to take a vector is easy. Now watch this node as I recompile and ta-da! Now there's a vector input. And as another quick example, we can remove this boolean since we aren't using it. So now let's call this event. Start the simulation, go to the SkukumScript IDE console, call onScookum triggered with 42 and other arguments, which triggers the blueprint event, which calls back into ScookumScript, where it prints out 42. ScookumScript has all the thousands of Unreal Engine commands available to blueprints, and makes it really easy to create and customize your own commands. This command has the robots go on sentry duty, randomly picking different robots and locations for them to path through. We can browse to this command, and we can go to the point where it picks the robots to run around, set a breakpoint, and then we can step through each command. We can continue to the last breakpoint, continue, and we can remove the breakpoint and resume. You can change the action the robot perform as they arrive at each point. So let's pop to the sentry action command, and we will change what they do while the code is actually running. And recompile it. Now, as they arrive at each point, they will do an explosion. And change the code live while it was running. You can write most, if not all, of your game in ScookumScript and blueprints, though integrating ScookumScript with C++ is easy, whether you are calling from C++ into ScookumScript or vice versa. All of the ScookumScript API is available, including the full source of the ScookumScript Unreal Engine plugin on GitHub. This is just scratching the surface of what ScookumScript can do for you. There's a team of veteran developers working full-time to make ScookumScript and your projects more Skookum. And Skookum means awesome.
That was actually done a few years back, so I'm assuming that the actual product itself is a little more extensive than that. You can download it if you're in Unreal. If you're not in Unreal, I apologize for wasting 2 minutes of your time, but I thought it was pretty interesting, and I look forward to trying it out in the future. I did like the way that it had dynamic real-time capabilities, so I could actually test it while the objects are interacting in my environment. So I'll have to take a look at it. Plus, I think they've got a number of libraries of pre-programmed items that can be applied directly to an object and provide AI and other things. So it might be something really cool if you're into Unreal. And obviously with AGOG labs joining Epic Games, I think that's going to be a big plus. Okay, so let's move on to our next item. Now that I'm bouncing around, let's see what we've got. Let's see, make sure I got them all. Okay, we talked about. All right, let's talk about the Intel sensor. So, as you remember, I was talking about this just a few minutes ago. It's the Intel RealSense tracking camera T265. If you remember, I mentioned that they had another camera out that provided depth sensing as well, based upon a structured light system. This one appears to have only two parallel, I think they're just black and white cameras. It does not specifically say, but we can go into the specifications and see. Yeah, it just says two fisheye lenses, 163 degrees. If that number sounds familiar to you, it's the same number that's on the occipital structure core. It's about 106 degrees there. And I'm assuming it's probably black and white, where actually there's only one camera on the occipital system, and they're combined for 163, so they may actually be less than that. But they're spread apart. They're probably about 63 millimeters apart to provide stereo parallax processing. And then the other important thing is this Myriad 2.0 VPU, which is what provides the internal visual processing and SLAM information, which is really cool because, as mentioned before with the Microsoft system and what I found with the occipital, they're sending the entire stream back to the computer, so it's very bandwidth intensive. Here you can just send back the information for the positioning tracking, and also they have something called, here we have visual inertial odometer. So you don't need, and somebody mentioned this, but a GPU, not a GPU, a GPS unit to identify it. Basically knows where you're at and then provides relative functionality so that it can keep track of how far you've gone from your origin. This is great for robotics and I can see it. The other important thing, do they identify it here? I think somewhere else. Let's see if there's more information that I can pull up. Here, let's go back to details. There isn't much. It's like only 1.5 watts or something like that. It's extremely low power, which is also important if you've got a battery operated object. It looks fairly lightweight, and as mentioned, it's pre-order, $199, but it won't be available to March. I guess let's see if we can look at it. It's got 2 mounting points on the back. Here we go, right here. I think they're what were they, M3s type screws, so you can mount it basically to anything. But I could see this being used, especially, let's see if I can go back and find it. If we go into their VR, where did I find that before? It's funny, when I need something, I can't find it. Driving me nuts. Well, they've got another version, it's like the 260, which is a VR kit made specifically for OEMs. So it would be kind of great if they supplied, or you can have access to the same SDK, you have the same RealSense access to the SDK 2.0, but if you can have access to that, then you've got a lot of the libraries available. And I'm not sure if they finally fleshed out their Unity package, but if they have, this could be really neat and a very simple add-on to a lot of devices that do not have 6 degrees of freedom, and provides that kind of capability for it. So looking forward to seeing it and actually working with it, and I will get back with you once I get it in March. All right, let's move on to the next item. If you're into 3D audio, you may already be familiar with this. I just so happen to stumble upon it and have one on order, and hopefully I'll have it in the next week so that I can test it, and we'll actually be giving a live demo at the next VR AR Nuts and Bolts meetup, which will now be in its new home at the VR Cafe in Tigard at the Washington Square Mall. But on that note, this is, if you know, I've talked about using, in fact, actually designed a case for it. The previous Zune H2N, but this one made specifically for it has, as you can see there, more mic elements, but it provides a complete full ambisonic pattern, and even more important, it has a processor built in to essentially matrix it and provide basically drop-in ambisonic spatial sound that you can put to use immediately. In fact, in the previous version, using the H2N, I've been able to bring that in. If you remember some of my previous little tutorials, you saw that I basically dropped it in, except if you remember, I had a problem using it in Unreal. It didn't like a full 24-bit, so I had to re-encode it in order for it to be recognized in Unreal. So, and if you go through it, you can do the ambisonic audio that we just talked about. Look at that, 24 bits and 96 kHz. As mentioned, Unreal does not support that, and I don't even know if Unity would allow drag and drop capability. Then you have binaural 3D stereo. This is really neat if you just want to apply it to standard 2D stereo, and then obviously you can do other things with it as well. And pretty excited, can't wait to get it in. They show it being used, let's say, with this GoPro underneath, but I plan to use it with my Instant 360, and I will have the new, I think it's the X coming in, the 1X. But if you notice, let's go back to the top of this. If you look at this area here, I'm going to build, basically design something that snaps in with a little mount. So that way your actual camera sits on top of it, and this becomes the mount for it. I don't know how well that will work, so I'll have to see if this is fairly rigid. It should be. And if that's the case, because those cameras are small, this should work quite well and basically create a very self-contained unit. You could possibly even put this on a desktop. I don't know if there's a headphone jack, and I thought I saw a line level output. And if that is encoded, that'd be kind of cool to create real-time 360 audio. Haven't got one yet, so I don't know, but I will get back with you with a full review of this as soon as I have one in hand. Okay, so let's move on to the next item. This is, let's see, and actually let me do this. I've got a little video. Why don't I go ahead and show it? Where is it? There we go.
I'm super impressed. It's a really nice sound. The playback's feeling good, and just to hear everything already spatialized, it is a delight. My name is Benedict Green. I'm one of the co-founders of Echo VR, which is a company dedicated to recording and creating spatialized sound for 360 VR experiences. And today we've been shooting with the H3 VR. It's got some amazing features. We've just done a great shoot. I've listened back already to some of the recordings and they sound lovely. But this is a recorder and a mic all in one. It has digital gyros, so it automatically knows the orientation. You don't have to bother telling it whether you're shooting inverted or end fire, which is fabulous. And when you extract the recordings, they're already in B format. You can monitor in a binaural HRTF style, so you're already hearing the sound sphere. So I think the combination of all these factors is really accelerating the workflow. Usually I wouldn't have a chance to hear how the binaural effect is sounding until I've extracted stuff from the SD card, got it into DAW. But with this system, I'm just hearing it straight away in monitoring and in playback. We've had a fairly interesting and mixed musical percussion shoot. It's handled it wonderfully. I am happy.
There you go. Can't wait to get it. Okay, let's move on to the next item. Let's see. I just got an update on this. If you're in the architectural world or AEC world, you might want to look into this, especially if you don't want to put a lot of time into Unity or Unreal. I don't know if I played with the demo. I've got a 45-day trial. You are welcome to get one as well. They brought this up to me, but this is essentially if you're working with BIM, and I remember when I was working as the IT director for a multidiscipline firm, this was a go-to thing that was just coming up, and essentially it's building information, I want to say modeling, and essentially all the components have a certain aspect to them, and essentially as you replace things, all these things are taken into consideration in the design and have all the aspects of that particular library of objects, so that you can click on it here and you can go through there and inspect these objects and make sure they meet by actually looking at them in the VR environment, if they're meeting the specifications of the full space. And literally walking around, which I have experienced in my own little design, really has been helpful. For instance, putting in the fireplace. They weren't aware that it didn't fit, and if they would have just come out and said, oh geez, I would have wasted 2 or 3 weeks, may have cost me more money, but I was able to plug it in using a SketchUp model that had been basically done by the manufacturer, and was able to tell immediately by walking around it, how large it was going to be and how it would look. And I think that's a very important aspect to this, and be able to do this. And there's also some collaboration capabilities, so you can have multiple people in it. If that sounds familiar, yes, it would be similar to the Wild, but here you can see multiple people. Notice the avatars look a little different. And here are the formats, and the one that's just come up is the Navisworks, and I think if you go out to Autodesk, you'll see that it also mentioned something about VR. I asked the representative if this is what they're talking about. I didn't get a response. Also, as you can see here, it's available, and they just fixed this because I said, is it available for Windows Mixed Reality? It is, which doesn't surprise me. The only thing is, let's see if we've got pricing here. Yeah, it's, you better be an architect or somebody who's working with this on a monthly basis, because you've got a basic plan of 50, Pro 150, Pro Plus, and at $50, what does that come out to a year? $600? That can be kind of expensive. unless you plan to do this on a regular basis. So that would be the only downfall, but some of the other systems out there are also in this ballpark. So, oh well, something to take a look at. They do have a nice, oh, it looks like it's built. Let me go back to that. Yeah, okay. So it's actually higher if you have to pay monthly. Oh, that's substantially higher. Oh well. So, don't know. I will try out their, I think it's a 90-day trial period, and over the next few weeks, then I will report back on this. But it looks pretty interesting. Lighting seems a little interesting as well. It doesn't seem really detailed, but you can do editing while you're in it, as you can see in the little video there. So. Actually, I do have a little video, so let me go ahead and play it. So as you can see, it's effective if you wanted to go around and review and do markups directly in the VR environment. And then I don't know if they'll show it here, but bring other people into this environment. And I saw this potential a couple of years ago, as mentioned, in doing my own as-built or upgrades to our house here. And the fact is that they support a number of formats now. Like I said, it might be a no-brainer if you're an architect or engineering or something that may make use of this. Okay, let's move on to the next item, and I guess I'm already there. This is the VBot system. I came about this because I was wondering if there was a robotic system that did phlebotomy, since I had to get my blood drawn the other day. And it sure seems to be a system like that, and this is more than likely a 3D render. I've got a little video. You'll see that the video looks a little different than this, so let me find it. In fact, a lot different.
Phlebotomists, the medical technicians who take blood samples, are getting some competition. Meet VBot, a medical robot that draws blood. Would you be willing to trust your arm to a robot with a sharp needle? A startup company in Miami, Florida is betting that you would. This is a prototype of the VBot, the first robot phlebotomist. It uses infrared light and image analysis to find the right vein, ultrasound to confirm the blood flow in the vein, and robotics to insert a needle into it. After the patient puts his arm through the archway, an infrared light illuminates his inner elbow for a camera. Software matches what the camera sees against a model built from thousands of vein images, looking for a suitable vein. Once the VBot system selects a target vein, it turns to ultrasound to confirm that the selected vein has sufficient blood flow for a successful blood draw. The robot then aligns the needle and sticks it in. The whole process takes about a minute. But what makes VBot better than a human technician? It still needs a human to start the process, and the idea of a robot drawing blood may be too creepy for some patients. But if you've ever gotten blood drawn and had the technician fail to stick a useful vein the first time, a robot that gets it right every time may be appealing. Mistakes are painful. They also waste time, and time is money in a busy hospital. Currently, VBot's machine can correctly identify the best vein to target about 83% of the time. That's about as good as an experienced technician. Company founder Stuart Harris plans to work the accuracy up to about 90% before starting clinical trials later this year. Harris will have to conquer the creepy factor, but the effort is worth it. In the United States alone, there are 1 billion blood draws a year. That's a potential $9 billion market for robot phlebotomy. For IEEE Spectrum, I'm Tekla Perry.
So as you saw in that IEEE Spectrum video, it doesn't look anything like this, but I was wondering, well, how would you obviously prevent the creep factor? One of the things is fully enclose all the mechanics there, and if you're into 3D fabricating, you know that a lot of the gears and the nozzle may look familiar to you, so I would not be surprised. As you saw, it was an Epson robotic arm, and then they probably 3D fabricated some of the components in the gear system in order to bring the needle down, and there's probably a suction-based system so that it goes into the tube. But I thought it was very cool. Obviously, the infrared, I thought maybe another point that they could do, or enhancement, is go with us. Like now that I know about the structure core, it has 2 infrared cameras. So if they use something like that, not only would they have the infrared information to determine where the veins are, but they would also be able to get a small amount of topography of the upper arm, which would help in identifying the surface of the skin. And as you notice, the ultrasonic, they did say 3D, so there's more than probably just the scene that you saw there. I don't know if that was from what they were providing or something that IEEE Spectrum put in there, but let's see if there's anything else in here. So there's the video we saw. But most ultrasounds are crude compared to high-resolution cameras, infrared cameras. So I think a little more, and as I mentioned, the computer vision, where in learning system, where they're probably using something like we just talked about, the convolution neural networks, in order to compile a series of images, and they don't necessarily have to stick everybody to do that. So they could just get a hundreds of test samples in order to build their system and database. So very interesting. This video was done a few years back, and I don't know where they're at now, but clearly they still have a website. I have reached out to them, so hopefully we'll have an interview in the future, because I would really like to know how much 3D was applied from the fabrication to the imaging analysis, and we'll learn more a little bit about that. And I also went out and did a little patent search, and there are a few items out there that you can find out more of what they have actually been awarded patents for. That'll be in the show notes. I won't go through it here. And yeah, so that's about it. All right, let's move on to the next item. Video-based reconstruction of 3D people, again using a learning system. This particular company, and let's see, I should have a video for this. I should, but I may not. Nope. Let's see if they've got, that's the PDF. Darn. Well, that's disappointing. Okay, but here's the PDF of it, and I'll see if I can find for the show notes a link to the video, or you can look for it yourself. So essentially what they did is they scanned to create a basically a learned system of the body, and then by having these different people move around, they, with a video camera, are able to compile the different frames into a full 3D image of it with skeleton. And here they show you some of the images. It's sad that I don't have the link. Oh well. And then obviously some of the math that goes into it. Basically a lot of summation. And then here are some of your experiments, and essentially, I wish I had the little video still. It showed them going through the process and all these characters having animation because they had a skeleton mapped with it as well. It doesn't look, really sophisticated like photogrammetry, but considering they're using video frames with a single camera, which means this could be used with your smartphone, I'm really interested in finding out more about it. But this was done, where was this done? In Germany, and this is more of a research product. I don't think anybody has actually taken this and applied it to a product yet. But maybe I didn't find it. Okay, so let's move on to the next item. Let's get into VR now. And you may have seen this, you may not have. This is called the Shadow. I'll go to the English. I guess I'm there already. The Shadow Creator. And actually, I've got a video for this, I think. So let me go ahead and find it.
And this is the new product of Shadow Creator.
Wrong item, but I'm going to get to that one in a second. So the Shadow Creator uses the HTC Vive, or Vive, their mobile environment, very similar to their environment for the HTC Vive. I can't remember what it's called now, Dan. They should learn more. Standalone headset. So it uses the Snapdragon 835, so this is very similar to the Vive Focus. The big difference, though, other than providing the headset 6 degrees of freedom, is that supposedly it has controllers. Notice there seems to be a wire here, or actually not a wire, I guess it's just a strap so that you don't lose it. They have changed it out. Somebody made a point of it. They had 2 of them, and now they only have 1. But at $399, it's very interesting. The sad thing is, I wasn't able to find any videos of this particular product, and nobody has done any reviews on it. And this came out around November, and I would think that they would have had this out in CES, and have not seen any videos of that happening. So I'm just wondering if we've actually got a unit that functions. And the reason I make that point is that if you go up to their list of products here, they have the Action 1, which appears to be their version of a mixed reality AR type headset. And again, it's just kind of like a prototype with just images of what it's possible, and that's what I was showing. So let me go back.
Shadow Creator this year.
And here somebody is from their booth is describing it, but no one talks about its quality, and so some people believe it's another mock-up. And I have not been able to find any videos of it in use or anybody providing any feedback. Its quality, if you look online, which you can jump back to, it's like 720p, and as we're finding here, 720p says it's like a 100-inch HD screen. So essentially you have 2 screens in front, FOV of 45, it's about what the HoloLens is, and then it's going to be, again, another Snapdragon 835, and it's going to be about $899. So I'm not really sure if I want to go in that direction. But again, nobody seems to have been able to test that. They talk about what you're able to see, but who knows if that's actually what happens when you actually use it. Kind of like the HoloLens when it first came out. And they win awards already for its design. So a lot of people are somewhat curious. And then they have this Halo Mini, which appears to be just like a little visor. And then if you go back to the video, they're showing off like lens glasses again. So it appears that we've got like a industrial design company creating these prototypes and then kind of saying, oh, these are going to be available, and who knows if they'll actually be available. None of them seem to work. And then, oh, it appears that they've got a unit back there, which must mean that that's their the unit we just talked about, which is the Action 1. But they don't actually talk about it in this video. But the link will be in the show notes if you want to listen to it yourself. Fact is that I have seen nothing on the Shadow VR, and a lot of people have already made comments. Who are they? Just popped out of nowhere. It'll be interesting, and I have a feeling what they've done is taken the work that Google has done with their version of their little controller, or maybe HTC Vive has already been working on it, and created a mock-up and talking about how it'll be available. I don't know. A lot of people have, I wouldn't say a lot, a few people have purchased it, but again, nobody has done any reviews on it, so I don't know where we're at with it. So that's where we're at with it. All right, let's move on to the next item. I think that's about it. Oh, one more item. I thought this was kind of cool. Let's see where, here we go. Nope. There. This is, there's a couple of articles on it. I think this is kind of neat if you are looking at creating prints of some of your own photography, or if you buy something or a painting, you can use this AR app that's available. It appears to be only on iPhones right now. You can frame the image with a selection of different frames and then see how it looks on your wall. I thought that was kind of neat. I know that when my wife and I were putting up images on ours, and I apologize for not switching my screen. Okay, there we go. So again, this little AR app, you can switch out frames with the image, either a painting, and I don't know if it selects the images that are on your phone, so that means you can probably import. I'll download it and try it out. It's available, it's free in the App Store, and yeah, I think that'll be kind of neat. The fact that it's free, that seems kind of cool. And obviously with AR Kit 2.0, doing both horizontal and vertical planes, it's no surprise that somebody would come up with this, and it'll be very interesting. Also, I don't know if you're familiar with it, and I don't know if this applies to it. When I was doing a version of this for AR Kit of my Nefertiti, we're going to call it sculpture, the new version has the ability of taking real-time lighting and using that to give it a more authentic shadows and also reflections. And so I'm wondering if that applies in this too. I'll have to try it out and see. But I could see this looking fairly realistic and giving you a good perspective and overview of what your image or painting would look like before it actually gets on the wall. And actually be able to place it on the wall would be kind of cool. I know a couple of times my wife said, oh, I'd like it here, and then I'd put in a nail, and the next thing you know, it's not where she wants it. So I either have to patch the hole, or just, if I lift it up a little further, and then I've got 2 holes in the wall. So this kind of would avoid that too. So the fact that it's free, I'm going to try it out, and I wonder if it's also available on like a tablet. Oh, I'll try them out and get back to you on that if you don't do it yourself. All right, well, that's it. Let's see where we're at. I'll spend a few minutes. So if you remember 2 weeks ago, I had spent some time, and I'll bring up the screen, working with, and if you remember, I showed off earlier in the episode what it looks like through the DreamGlass, and frankly, it's pretty cool. Let me open it up. And I think this version of the Structure XR doesn't work, so I'm not going to go through the process. But the new Structure XR SDK, as mentioned, has a few other features. And the little demo has capsules and spheres. But the key is that this version now does anchoring, so you can anchor objects on the wall or on the ground, which is kind of cool. And they had a little demo, and sadly the demo doesn't work on the latest version of Unity, where I've done something wrong. But I wanted to show how easy it is, like I said the last time, for you to bring in your own stuff, just basically drop it in, but and also bring in the Dream World DreamGlass plugin. So you just bring in their camera rig, and as mentioned the last time, you have the camera rig and then the head position, which is the actual camera. The camera rig, again, if you remember what I said, make sure you're on PC, because you can also set this up to work with Android. I found, however, that the Android library just now failed because they also included, what did they include with it? I guess an artificial intelligence component, and I can't remember the name of it now, but that didn't work in Unity, so I had to remove it. But you have your PC platform, and then you can identify tracking. Remember, if you're going to be using something like the structure core for your positional tracking, you would just leave that off. And then your active camera, in fact, I disabled them, but you could identify the camera. You can look at your IR hand tracking, and which is kind of neat, because if you select that, then you can add a module to actually detect your hands too. In this particular example, I turned it off, and then you can emulate so that if you didn't want it to go to the actual display, you can emulate here in the window as though it were going into display as a single screen, which is kind of a nice feature. Because if you remember, the screen itself is offset by 90 degrees each way, so you have your objects facing out. And the reason for that is the screens themselves that you're looking at, then reposition them so that they're right side up. But when you look at them on the screen here, they don't look correct, and this emulator allows it to look correct when you're using it. It also allows you to, if you're using their tracking, you can see that being played in as well. All right, the things that are important for the structure core is that you need to have the XR session in place and running. And here I have a little icon so that I can activate it. And I should be able to go ahead and activate it. And then we can bring it up, and then notice how many frames per second. It should be able to push about 60, but if I've got other things going on here, we've averaged out about 30 frames per second. That seems to be about what it's pushing, but they do mention they're going to optimize this to get a full 60 frames. The other thing that I couldn't get working, and I did see it, let's see if I can get it up and running this time. You can actually bring up a live visualization, which, yeah, it didn't come up again. This happened the last time too. So this is all kind of a work in progress with occipitals, so you'll have to report it to them that it's not working. But you need to make sure that that's activated, or the service needs to be activated. I do notice that it's still crashing once in a while. So if you do plan to turn this service into something that launches immediately, just keep an eye on it. If it crashes, normally the icon here goes away. But what you're doing is you're talking to that service through here. Then you just have to identify your camera rig here. And it could be the camera that comes with the demo, or in my case I replaced it with the DW camera rig. And once that was done, if I would launch it right now, and as mentioned, I'm using a new version of Unity, and it doesn't seem to like it. At least that's my assumption, but when I first tried it out, it seemed to work great. I could basically take the DreamGlass, walk around, and see the capsules. And then also they have some animations so that you can test out their plane detection here. So as you look at something, it will basically illuminate a plane, both vertical and horizontal, so that you can see it. And then you can also, they have a particle system so that you can see particles being aimed at the point of anchor, which was kind of neat. So this is built in their little SDK, and you can take it and use it to your advantage. So it all works right. Like I said, though, it didn't work in this example. In fact, I'll show you. It will. Let me clear this. It will crash. See? Oh well. That's what I get for updating my Unity. Okay, so that's pretty much it. And let's see if I can launch the demo again, and you can watch it on the screen. So let's try it. Okay, service is running, so let's bring up the Nefertiti demo. And if you notice, you've got a little screen here. All you need to do is turn it off of Windows, go down to 1600 by 1280. I have a graphics level I set up called level 6, which gives me a really decent quality. I'm going to go ahead and put it on Fantastic. it's going to go to play too, so let's see if everything works. And if it does, I should get something showing up. Yep, there it is in my USB camera. So let's add me to it so you can see me while this is going on. Okay, so there she is again. So if you notice, there is a little bit of transparency, especially in the darker areas, but what you're seeing on the edges there is that she's in fact, let's see if I can bring her closer to me without breaking it. Yeah, so now she's further away because the structure sensor is functioning. And then you can see that, make sure it doesn't fall. So what you're seeing there are the glass sides of the cabinet, and what you're seeing up here, let's see if my finger can get in the way. Yeah, right there is the top bridge of the DreamGlass. And if you noticed, I had actually tracking there. And the what do you want to call it? The blurring is actually my camera. It's not a very good one, but it's the only thing I could use in order to mount a camera on my little head here. Let's see if I can bring him a little closer so you can see him. There he is. Let's see. Yeah, so you notice I lost my, there we go. So if you notice, I had lost positional tracking there, and the reason for that, now it's back, and I would have to reset. Let's see if I can do that. Oops, wrong keyboard. There we go. I basically pointed at a very bright light source, and it doesn't seem to like that. And then I can push it forward, we can get closer to it. So what's really neat about this is that you saw the, it's like 2560, so basically each eye has about 1280 by 1440 resolution, which is about what you have in a lot of the headsets. It's got about 90 degrees of FOV. And as you get closer using the positional tracking, you can see the resolution, especially if you use higher density models or higher resolution textures and so forth. So it's really very much like going in and visiting this particular object. Now, you know, it still needs some tweaking. This is being used on a GTX 1070 laptop with an i7 processor. Even though it's a laptop, it's still fairly beefy, runs fairly well with VR, but I did notice that I did get some lag in the positional tracking. The actual headset itself is pretty good as far as not having any flicker, and even though you see some blown out areas here, it's more the camera. So it actually looks quite well, and so I guess you can see that there. So I'm pretty impressed with it, and again, it's something they should have offered, but we're going to see some newer products. And then, as mentioned, when the Intel product comes in, I may play around with that and see if I can also get some positional tracking with that. The version, I think that's coming out in March, I think, of the occipital structure sensor is going to be another $100, $300, but it will provide an actual infrared projector, a wide-angle camera, so that it can do RGB, not RGB, there's no color camera, but it can do wide-angle, 106 degrees, which is very helpful in the positional tracking, and 60 frames per second, which is obviously the direction that you would need to go. The only thing right now, let's see if we can see it, I'll jump back to my screen so you can see it yourself. Is, let's bring up that was good. crash already? No. So where is it? There it is. The XR service right now is running at 45%. So that's a little harsh. So hopefully they'll bring it down. Now, the thing that it's already about 50% less than it was when I first was working with it. It was eating up, let's say, 80, the 90s. So the fact is that it's now under 50% is great. And then I'm still in the actual executable that I created using Unity is about 15%. So it's consuming a lot of the processor. So I would be, if you're going to work with it, make sure that you've got a fairly beefy machine. I have tried to use this on a Nook, and it's just not powerful enough. I do have the Crimson, I think. I have a version of that coming in a month, so I should be able to test it using the GPU there. Okay, so I think that's about it. If you got any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And let me find my main camera. Okay, bye, and I'll see you in another couple of weeks. Keep in mind, if you're in the Portland area, I have started up the, oh, I've got some noise here. Oh, wow. I'm going to be starting up the VR AR meetup again, VR AR Nuts and Bolts meetup. And I think the next date is going to be February 20th, which is a Wednesday, about 3 weeks from now, 3 to 4 weeks from now. And so if you're part of the meetup group, don't hesitate to come on by. It's going to be in the Washington Square Mall at the, and I'll mention this again in a couple weeks, but the VR Cafe. And if you go back through some of my YouTube videos, I did an interview with them. Kind of a neat place. They've got about 4 VR stations playing the latest games. So if you don't have any or want to test them out before spending $50 to $100 on a game, head out to them if you're in the Portland area, or the Tigard, or any of those areas near Portland. Okay, I'll say goodbye. Bye.